Hey, Fred, I've been looking forward to this conversation for such a long time. I've had so many people in my audience and my comments asking for your channel. They watch your content on YouTube. They've been following you for a while. Your Twitter takes are great, and I've learned so much from you. I know my audience has learned so much from you, but there are some things that you believe in that I don't quite agree with. So I want to go into that with you.
Okay,
And how are you doing
perfect.
today? How are you?
I'm really good. Thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. Are you enjoying
Yeah.
this dip, this little drop in price?
I mean, I guess my perspective is kind of on the month to month basis, not so much on the day to day basis.
Okay.
You're trading in the 90s thousands, like
Yeah.
it's incredible, if you told me a year ago we'd be trading at 90,000 Bitcoin, I'd be like, wow, that would be
Yeah.
unbelievable. I kind of
Yeah.
thought it might happen, but it's exceeding my expectations.
That's good. Do you think the ETF? So actually, something that I learned from you was um, the inflows from the ETFs are more important now than the halving cycle.
Oh yeah.
Do you? This is something that you said a long time ago. I don't know if you still agree. Do you still agree with that?
Yeah, I don't even think the halving cycle is important at this point
No. Okay.
at
Why
all.
not?
I mean, it's really just a question of scale, right? I think these were important. You know, it's even debatable whether the last one was important, but I think that the things that are driving the market right now is TradFi adoption. That's the big one, right? And and the scale of TradFi adoption is it's hundreds of billions of dollars potentially, right? Potentially even trillions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
And you know the moving from 450 Bitcoin a day right now that is mined to 225 Bitcoin a day in 4 years. It's not going to be any kind of supply shock. It's sort of irrelevant. We have MicroStrategy just bought 50,000 Bitcoin yesterday.
Hmm.
So like what is that? That's 100 days worth of supply.
Yeah.
MicroStrategy alone is buying more than the entire mining. The ETF complex is buying a multiple of the Bitcoin that is being mined every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just don't think that having this, and even the miners are buying Bitcoin. Yeah, even
Yeah.
Marathon is buying Bitcoin. So I just don't think that you can make the argument that there's going to be this supply shock when we get the next halving. It really will be completely insignificant, and nobody will care.
Yeah.
Um, so
I can see. I can see.
I don't, I'm not debating whether we're going to have bull markets and bear markets. Okay.
Right.
I'm just debating whether they're going to coincide with mining cycles, with halving cycles. I don't see any reason to believe that we're going to have a bear market in 2026 at this point. Why?
It's actually crazy to me. MicroStrategy bought a quarter of a percent of the total supply.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's
Yeah.
a quarter of a percent, like you said, 100 days of supply, which is yeah,
Yeah.
450 a day, so about 100 days, and that barely. I mean, I don't even think that really moved the market. Obviously, it's off the it's what's it called, OTC,
Yeah, because
off the over the counter.
they expected to buy half a year's supply. You know,
Yeah.
I mean
Oh yeah, 100,000. Yeah.
right, but so I just think that everything is the last thing people are interested in right now is what's happening in the mining world. It just
Yeah.
I have no interest in it whatsoever. I don't own any miners, and I just don't really care what happens to Bitcoin miners.
Yeah.
Um, and ultimately, yeah, that we want there to be mining. Is it important if they're at, one zeta hash or half a zeta hash or two zeta? It doesn't
I
matter.
I think it's important to think of it this way, though. I don't know. I think it's more of a psychological kind of thing. If let's say, for example, we have all these miners that go bankrupt over time. Some of them will go bankrupt because they're getting less supply for the work that they're putting in. It's getting harder and harder to mine, and
Yeah.
I think Wall Street. I think some big players are going to see. these companies went bankrupt, so nobody is too big to fail. And nothing is going to change the supply. Nobody can change the supply. I think it's just going to build more and more confidence in the 21 million supply cap. Because right now people still think, oh, what if the supply increases? Anybody can increase the supply. Some nerd's going to come out here and he's going to press a button and they're going to increase the supply, or they're going to shut down the network, all that stuff. People still believe that, right? I genuinely think
Who
people still.
believes that? I mean, yeah, maybe Jamie
99% of the world
Dimon
has no
sort of
Bitcoin.
believes that, but like, I don't know.
But
Nobody really serious who started to take a really serious look at Bitcoin really believes that.
99% of the world has no Bitcoin, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think part of the reason for why they don't own Bitcoin is because they think it's a scam, a pyramid scheme, a Ponzi scheme. They think it can be shut down. The internet is going to get shut down. It uses too much. All the FUD that goes around. Like I think that's part of. I think the protocol maintaining what it's supposed to do is actually adding to that. The what is it? The Lindy effect, where if something goes on for longer and longer,
It
I
was
think
named after a restaurant in New York that
right.
it had been open so long that people said, well, it's been around for 100 years, so therefore it'll stay around next year.
Oh, I
It
actually
did
didn't know about
finally
that.
shut down the restaurant, by
Oh,
the
it
way.
did. Okay.
Yeah.
But
So
I think that contributes to it. No, with Bitcoin, because the people
yeah.
see, oh, this halving keeps happening. Nobody can change it. Nobody can stop it. This is going to be continuous for a very long time.
Yeah, I just think the individual fate of individual miners is
Yeah.
doesn't matter. And there's a lot of the miners also existed when there wasn't the ETFs, right? So people invested in Riot and Marathon when they couldn't invest in IBIT or FBTC
Yeah.
or MSTR, right? So these miners have been around as public proxies for owning Bitcoin for a very long time. I'd argue that they're sort of less important right now, and there's better ways for most people to buy Bitcoin than to buy the miners. But if you want to buy the miners, maybe you can speculate.
Yeah.
Maybe you can find one that's that's undervalued. I personally just don't feel like it's a good use of my time trying to figure out who are the good ones, who are the bad ones. I'm not that interested in it. So I also don't waste a lot of sleep thinking, what will happen if the hash rate doesn't go down, or do we have to worry about fees, or what happens in 100 years when we sort of mine the last Bitcoin.
Yeah.
These are not relevant questions right now, and I think we can focus on the questions that are likely to make a difference, like legislation and TradFi adoption and things like that.
Yeah.
Those are the things that are going to make the most difference in the next 10 years.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I'm focused on.
And I wanted to ask your thoughts. That was actually going to be my next question. So you made a video, my 5 Bitcoin predictions for next cycle.
Yeah.
I think it was. Was that what it
Yeah.
was? But you were saying how for one thing you said was, I don't remember all of them, but one thing you said was, I think you said something along the lines of the strategic Bitcoin reserve. That was one thing. You said something along the lines of the power law not breaking.
Yeah.
Those are the 2 things that I remember. Do you remember the other predictions by any chance?
I made one prediction, which I still believe, that MSTR will trade at a multiple of 1 or lower.
Okay.
To their Bitcoin reserve. That
I want to dig into that one.
Yeah, listen, I think that's a big one. We can go through all of them in sequence if you want.
Let's do that. That would be great.
Yeah. So, well, let's say the first one is the power law won't break. Well, so why do I think that? Well, we've gone through a lot of crazy ups and downs in Bitcoin in terms of legislation. China banning Bitcoin mining, the Winklevi trying to get in an ETF, the ETF finally succeeding, the Mt. Gox blowing up. We've had to say that we haven't had these crazy events is not true. We have had completely crazy events in Bitcoin, and yet we have a very, very, very consistent statistical behavior of the price of Bitcoin. especially when you smooth it out over 4 years, right? So if you look at the the Bitcoin price, and you either look at just the 4-year moving average of Bitcoin, right? That's a sort of nice gradual curve up. Never goes down, by the way, right? Never has gone down once. The 4-year average of price of Bitcoin has never gone down. And then if you look at the log price of Bitcoin, right? The log of Bitcoin price, and you average the logs over 4 years, you'll see that that's just a complete straight line, right? So, I think that the chance of us deviating from that behavior in the next 4 years is very low, right? I don't think if something fits a straight line with 99% R squared, that you're going to see that line break in 4 years, And so while I do think we could go up to 500,000 next year, right? That wouldn't necessarily in and of itself break the power law. Okay. Could we go down to 50,000 next year? Yeah, we could. Would that break the power law? No. So I think the power law doesn't tell you much about next year, right? What it doesn't, because to say that we're between 50,000 and 500,000, well, yeah, duh, right? That's not saying much, right? Where the power law tells you something, it tells you something 5 years out in the future, right? And 5 years out in the future sort of says, okay, we're going to be somewhere between, let's even go 10 years. It says we're going to be somewhere between 300,000 and 2 million 10 years from now. Well, that's actually a pretty narrow range, right? If you think about it, right? It's sort of like, it's not going to go down to 100,000. That would not be within the power law range. We are definitely going up in the next 10 years. We're definitely going up probably more than 2x over the next 10 years. Do I know that the U.S. stock market's going up 2x? No, I don't. The U.S. stock market can go down or stay the same for long periods. We've seen that, right? The NASDAQ in 2000 went up to 5,000, right? And it got back up there. It took after 2010 to go there. So there was, we didn't get there. It took another 10 years. Gold went to $1,800 an ounce in 2011, and it took until 2020, 2019 for it to get back to that kind of level, right? So, assets as big as the stock market or gold can have 10-year periods in which they're basically going down and then having to go back up. But Bitcoin doesn't seem to be that. Bitcoin seems to be an asset that is growing on this, quasi-exponential rate. Not quite exponential. It's going at an exponential, but the constant growth rate is not constant. It's decreasing, right? So that's sort of what the power law says. And whether you think it should or not, it's a mathematical fact that it has up till now, right? So I just think that the mathematics suggest that the power law will continue for the next 5 years or so.
So what do you think would break the power law? Like it might continue, but what do you think could break it? There is a non-zero chance, right? There's a non-zero chance.
Yeah, there's a non-zero chance, but it's sort of your best estimate of what,
right.
Like it's not zero, but like there's a chance we're going to be visited by aliens too next week, right?
There's a non-zero chance that somebody finds my private keys, all that stuff, of course.
Yeah,
but I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts of what could break it? I think
the one thing that could significantly change the entire game would be if the U.S. actually significantly makes steps to acquire Bitcoin in its strategic reserve, right? Because I think if they did that, and let's say they actually did that next year, right? And they said, you know what, we're $36 trillion in debt. We're at 7% debt to GDP, but we're still going to go out of our way and either print money or sell gold or do something to get more Bitcoin in a strategic stockpile, right? And we're going to start going, let's say we're going to say, Our target is to add 1 million Bitcoin within 4 years in this pile, or 4 million, like RFK Jr. said. I think if you get to something like that, right, where there's a very serious plan to accumulate Bitcoin at the sovereign U.S. level, right? If that becomes a reality, and then if that happens, we definitely have China sort of saying, well, if you're going to do that, we are too. Yeah. And then Russia would say, if you're doing that, we're going to do it too, right? It's just sort of like that movie. There was a movie with Danny DeVito, and he goes, I don't like nuclear weapons. I don't like lawyers, but if the other side has a bunch of lawyers, I need a bunch of lawyers, you know? And he goes, so lawyers are like nuclear weapons. I don't like them, but I got to have them. Yeah. And, I think that's the game theory could completely change with this, with the strategic reserve. I think that's the one thing I think that could cause things to move a lot faster than potentially we change. I do think that there's tons and tons of money in TradFi that's going to go into Bitcoin. But, TradFi is incredibly conservative and slow. So the power law is basically just sort of a measure of how slow that is, right? Yeah. It's a measure of how slow to react this enormous boatload of dollars that's sitting there, that's hundreds of trillions, right? For them to even to go to 1%, that's going to take an enormous thing, and it's not going to happen overnight, right? And I think the power law says, well, you're not going to get 1% overnight. You might get 1% over a 10-year period, and you're going to get a tenth of 1%, and that's going to go to maybe 0.2%, in a couple of years, and then it's going to go to 0.4%, and then 0.6, and then a full percent, and ultimately potentially multiple percent, right? But it's I don't expect that TradFi alone is going to. It's not like everybody's going to wake up and decide that they all want Bitcoin instead of S&P. These things take a long time for people's asset allocation decisions to really change, right?
But we're now seeing. Have you seen I mean, of course, about MicroStrategy, but have you seen what was it? Alliance? Is that their name? Yeah. They bought some of the MicroStrategy convertible bond. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that could change things? Because if
it's one insurance company spending a very small percentage of their assets on one bond.
It was like a few tenths of a percent or something. Very, very small percentage. Yes, but don't you think? Small, don't you think if it performs for them, others will follow suit?
Eventually, it's just not going to. It will not happen that quickly, right? Who is the largest insurance holder in the United States? It's Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett, yeah. Right?
Warren Buffett's not about to start buying Bitcoin bonds. He won't. As long as he's alive, he will not buy Bitcoin bonds. No, not going to be alive for that.
That's his ego, though. No, that I feel like that he's not willing to study this thing. He's not willing to look at it. He's not willing to let his ego shatter, because he's been wrong for such a long time, and he's going to continue being wrong. It's not like him not doing it. I think all this is going to do is it's going to transfer value from other insurance companies, or from his insurance company to other insurance companies. That's how power changes hands.
Yeah, look, I'm just saying it's not going to change. If you're expecting really fast movement from this group, you're going to be disappointed. Is Vanguard going to start offering Bitcoin? I don't think so.
I get what you mean.
They're going to take a long time. Yeah. It's sort of like, will Peter Schiff start buying Bitcoin? Probably not. It's just, change happens sometimes at glacial levels at these points. And look, I'm old enough that I know, stocks were not always that big a deal as an asset allocation, right? So when I started on Wall Street in the 80s, right, most large high net worth people did not want to put their money in stocks. Okay. They wanted to put their money in bonds. That's kind of where people view stocks was just viewed as too risky, too crazy, you know. Uh, maybe you'll get a good return, but probably not, you know. And meanwhile, bonds paid, 8%, government bonds. Like, okay, you want 8% or do you want some crazy Nabisco, which RJR Nabisco, which was the top, LBO target at that point, right? So, probably 8% sounds better, or maybe you take 9% and you get some kind of mortgage bond or something,
Yeah.
So it took, it's taken from, a good 40 years to really completely change the religion from all bonds and a little bit of stocks to, you will be 60-40 and your majority of your money will be in stocks. Even if you're 75 years old, you should put all your money in stocks. So, it's going to take a lot to change that mentality to say, wait a second, you might want to put 5% of your money in Bitcoin,
Yeah.
So it's
That's starting though. No, I feel like more advisors are actually talking. If they're talking about it,
starting.
Yeah,
it's definitely starting, but it's just not. If I had to guess how long it's going to take for the average portfolio, to go instead of from 60-40 to go 60 or 55, 35, 5, and then 5% for Bitcoin. It's going to take 10 years for that, for everybody to get on board with that. Why? Because people are slow and, people kind of create these mental models of how they should allocate their money. And we're just at the point right now where people's mental model includes that we're not at the top of a range anymore. I'll give you an example. So I was talking with my mother has some money at Morgan Stanley, and she's got a portfolio manager that manages their money, right? And I'm on these calls, once a month with him. And I said, well, why don't we just put some allocation to Bitcoin because you guys now have that ability. He goes, well, first of all, we still don't have that, discretionary account. I'm like, really? You still can't even put her in he goes, well, we could put her in MicroStrategy. We can't put her in the ETF yet. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And he said, well, so first of all, I don't have literally don't have the authority to do that right now. And then second of all, he goes, from where I sit, we're still at the top of the range. We're still back, where it was back in 2021, which was 69,000, So maybe we should wait until it goes back to 50,000 or 40,000 and then buy that. So anyways, I think that's the kind of thing that, that you come to that kind of conclusion that we're in this range and 70,000 is the top and maybe 20,000 is the bottom, and maybe a better time to buy might be right in the middle, like 35,000, right?
Yeah.
And, from you and I are sitting there going, it's never going to get back to 35,000. It will never get there, right? But, from his perspective, it's like a very highly speculative thing that doesn't really belong in, an elderly person's portfolio. And if it does, maybe we should try to not appear too stupid and buy it at the all-time high. So, I just think I just think that, I have a lot of friends from, Wall Street and stuff, and none of them own any Bitcoin. They don't. They I literally got a friend of mine who's, managing a multi-billion-dollar high net worth operation for Merrill Lynch. And he's like, I hadn't talked to him in a while, even most of this year. And he's like, hey, Freddie, congratulations on your Bitcoin. He goes, I just can't deal with the volatility. I don't know how you can.
Yeah, I mean, I get all that. I understand that, but I feel like at some point they're gonna crack, and I think that's gonna come sooner than we think.
But it's not gonna crack though. It's just it'll be a trickling in. It's just gonna it's the numbers are so much bigger than you might think. They're
Yeah,
really, really big. They're literally hundreds of trillions of dollars. But
of
it's
course.
very, very, they're it, it's trying to convert, it's trying to walk into a mosque in Tehran and say, hey, I got this new thing called Judaism. Why don't you give it a try? You're not
Yeah,
going to get a great reception. You know what I mean? So, there is a very strong religion in the Vanguard religion. It is a religion, right? And
yeah,
now we have a new religion. That's the religion of Bitcoin,
yeah,
And I think when we come with our religion, they're like, get out of our sacred place of worship, with your false god, you know.
yeah.
And
So is
so,
this part of
yeah,
your 'cause so you say that MicroStrategy's NAV premium will come back down to 1 or below, and do you think
yeah.
that'll be sustained? And I guess, is this part of the reason for why you think that?
No, I think here's the thing. I think we are going to see a bear market in the next 3 to 4 years. I think it's possible we don't, right? But
Right.
I think if I had to guess, having lived through two of these things myself, they were very, very painful. I mean, 2018
Yeah.
was incredibly painful. 2022 was also horribly painful, right? And having lived through those bear markets, I think we may not get one as bad as 2022, but all markets do have bear markets. Now, I think
Yeah.
when we do have the next bear market, and I don't know what will drive it, I don't know. I don't especially know if we can predict when it's going to be, right? And but I think in that bear market, what are people going to sell first? MSTR or the Bitcoin that they have in cold storage?
MSTR.
Right. They're going to sell MSTR, right? So if they're sitting on MSTR and MSTR is trading in a multiple of 3 or 4 or even 2, they're
Mhm.
going to be like, well, I'm going to get rid of this first, right? It's like it's run by Sailor. He might get some liquidated. He might have some margin calls, whatever. If I got my Bitcoin in cold storage, well, that I know. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. Great. I have a framework for dealing with a bear market in my ledger, right?
Right.
So I think they're going to sell the MSTR, and I think they'll sell it down to where it starts becoming a bargain, right? Like
Mhm.
you don't go from rich to sort of rich. You go from rich to cheap, right? Now, what's cheap? Well, cheap might be, 30% underneath fair value, right? That might be cheap, right?
Yeah.
And, we know what that looks like because we can look at GBTC, right? And GBTC was trading at, 45% under its net asset value back in January of 2023, right? I know because I bought a bunch in January of 2023,
Right.
and it was incredibly good buy, right? And I already had plenty of Bitcoin, but I just sort of said, you know what? I just love this discount. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
yes, you're giving me, in addition to the fact that Bitcoin had sold off so bad in 2022, you're also giving me 45% discount. I got to take more, right? So
But
I did.
I think the difference here is that GBTC was a closed-end fund. MicroStrategy is not. MicroStrategy is, it's a business that's operating to give you more Bitcoin, or to have each share
Wow.
backed by more
Okay.
Bitcoin. I think they're different, right? I think there is
Well,
some
they're modestly different, right?
yeah.
Right now they're different because right now MicroStrategy is issuing these convertible bonds and raising more money throughout the money stock at the market stock offerings, right?
Yeah.
But in a bear market, they're remarkably similar, right? Like if we get into a complete bear market, right?
Mhm.
There's not going to be any new convertible bond offerings. There won't. Those
Okay.
things will be on ice, okay? And do you think they're going to be selling more stock? No, they will not. They will not be selling stock at 1 times multiple or
Yeah.
0.9 times a multiple. They're right. What they
They won't
will be. Yeah.
I don't think they'll sell stock. I agree with that, but I do think that they may continue to sell bonds because in the past they haven't. We've never gone through a bear market where somebody's selling basically Bitcoin backed bonds, right? And that I think that
Well,
changes things, right?
here's they could. So here's
Maybe
the
my
problem.
perception of this is wrong. So I want to learn from you. I
Yeah.
want to.
Well, here's the problem there. Okay, they could sell bonds. Um, yes, they could. They could sell bonds similar to the bonds that they sold their first batch of bonds. Right. If you remember, those bonds were at a 9% yield or so, 6% yield initially.
This was in
They
2020.
would be in. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Those were like actual Bitcoin backed bonds. They actually had to segment out, say this Bitcoin is going to be used as collateral for those bonds, right? Very, very tricky. I mean, those bonds were dangerous, those bonds, right? Which is one of the reasons they quickly paid off those bonds, right? They did not want to have that stuff sitting on their balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Would they do that? Yes, they could do that, right? They could definitely say, listen, we got all this Bitcoin. We're not going to sell this Bitcoin, right? But we're going to take, I don't know, let's take 100,000 Bitcoin that they have, right? And then we're going to pledge that Bitcoin and we're going to borrow some money against that Bitcoin, right? And what would the interest rate there be? Would it be 1%? Absolutely not. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That Bitcoin is going to, that loan is going to be a 6% loan. Okay. It will, I mean, in today's environment, it'd be a 9% loan, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm just saying, and it would be collateralized by the Bitcoin. So are they going to issue a convertible bond? Nope, they're not going to do it. If their stock is trading and we're in the depths of a bear market, they're not issuing convertible bonds. They're issuing bonds against Bitcoin, high coupon. They're going to tie up Bitcoin, and everybody's going to start worrying about those bonds, triggering some redemption clause, right? And if it does,
I don't think there are any redemption clauses for it to come down for those bonds.
Well, no. What they can say is that they need to have a certain amount of collateral, otherwise they need to sell, right? They sort of say this loan is backed by these Bitcoin, but if the price drops, you have to put more Bitcoin on, right?
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, you have to repay the loan. Those are your choices. I'm just saying, all of a sudden you can get into a world of pain, right?
Yeah.
With these, Now, again, when does that happen? That happens in a bear market. Right? In a bear market, do you really like having $5 billion of debt in a bear market? No, that's usually what kind of destroys you in a bear market.
I mean,
right?
Keep in mind that let's say Bitcoin's price if there is a bear market, for it to impact MicroStrategy, Bitcoin's price has to go much, much, much lower than where it is
but
today.
here's the thing. Here's what could happen, right? This is what potentially worries me is we add so much convertible debt to this thing. Right now it's at 8 billion, right? There's $8 billion of convertible debt in this thing. I think 8, maybe it's 9. I can't even remember. But let's suppose we get to $30 billion of convertible debt. Okay. Let's say, right? And now all of a sudden we hit a really bad bear market. Now people start worrying that MicroStrategy is going to pose a systemic risk to the entire system.
Okay.
And they're going to start, the price of Bitcoin now will actually go down because people are worried that MicroStrategy might have to sell their Bitcoin, which is then going to create more of a vicious cycle on the downside, right?
Yeah.
So the flywheels work on the way up. The flywheels work negatively on the way down, right? And if MicroStrategy gets too big, I could potentially see a danger on the way down. And does that mean it's a systemic danger long-term for Bitcoin? No, but it just could mean we get into a really bad bear market for Bitcoin. Yeah. And one of the casualties of that bear market might be MSTR, right? It might be, right? So there's definitely some scenario where MSTR goes bust. Okay, in my opinion, that's not zero, right? The way. So I don't think it's going to be, again, none of this stuff's catastrophic for Bitcoin. And, 20 years from now,
Everything is
regardless,
good for Bitcoin. At the end of the day, if MicroStrategy,
ultimately, it's all good for Bitcoin. But I'm just saying,
yeah,
I think if you were looking at this thing from a personal point of view, I really
yeah,
think there's two ways you can look at this. First of all is you're one of the many people in the world who can't buy Bitcoin. Okay. And I put a tweet out today because I just was like, okay, if you can't buy Bitcoin, but you can buy MSTR, raise your hand. And I had people like, well, I live in Norway. I can't buy Bitcoin. I live in the UK. I can't buy Bitcoin. I live in Saudi Arabia. I can't buy Bitcoin. I live in Sweden. I can't buy Bitcoin. I'm a client of Vanguard. I can't buy Bitcoin. So there's
yeah,
all these people out there who just can't buy the ETF, right? And many people in Europe, they just can't even buy physical Bitcoin. It's just like too hard, right?
mm,
So
that is, yeah,
so there's a whole class of people for which, if they want exposure to this general asset class, MSTR is one of very few ways that they can easily participate, right?
yeah. But
So
see,
those guys, yeah.
the way that I see it, MicroStrategy is not a Bitcoin proxy. MicroStrategy is an investment that is meant to provide a way to get access to more Bitcoin. And I think what they're doing is they're just taking any Bitcoin that they can off the market. And over time, let's say the price keeps going up.
Yeah,
Eventually,
I
the price will
understand.
10x.
Raghav, I understand, but you own Bitcoin, right? You
Yeah,
actually have physical
of
Bitcoin,
course.
right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
physical, native Bitcoin, right?
yeah.
Now, if you're in the UK
Hmm.
and your main source of money is in your pension fund or something,
Yeah,
and the only way to have access to this is to buy MSTR, right? That's your only choice, right? You're in a different category than Rajat sitting in Toronto, and you can buy actual Bitcoin if you
yeah,
want. So I think that there are sort of two kinds of people. One is people just can't buy anything else and have to buy MSTR. They're sort of trapped into liking it or not. Now, whether it's an asset that delivers more Bitcoin every year, it has a Bitcoin yield, I get all that, right?
yeah,
But that's one class of people. The other class of people is people who have Bitcoin and, they may say, you know what, I have Bitcoin, but I want to support other types of things. Maybe I won't call it diversify, but they want to have a little fun, right? They
hmm,
might want to say, I'm going to speculate a little bit with 10% of my Bitcoin, or maybe even 30% of my Bitcoin, right? So I feel like those are the two kind of classes of people I see with MSTR. And if you look at people on my spaces and stuff,
yeah,
I say most of the people on my spaces are people who actually own Bitcoin, but they just want to have a little fun, right? And they're like sitting there going, yeah, you know what, Fred, I'm willing to play with like 10, 20, 30% of my Bitcoin, maybe even 50%, right? With MSTR. Personally, I don't see the need to do that anymore. I did it. I was one of those guys, right?
yeah.
I bought calls on MSTR. I did really well with my calls on MSTR, okay? But do I see a massive need to buy MSTR at 3 times the amount of Bitcoin, even
Yeah.
if they're producing a Bitcoin yield? No, I don't.
But have you thought of it from this perspective? You're paying for what MicroStrategy might do in the future, and you don't know what that could be. For example, that could be a Bitcoin insurance company where they make tons of policies with Bitcoin as their, I guess, almost collateral. They use this Bitcoin to be able to issue all these insurance policies. They have a Bitcoin bank where, again, the law of numbers makes a huge difference. So if they have 2% of the supply, and the supply is worth so much, they can pretty much be ahead of every other competitor who wants to do the same thing.
Well, here's the thing. Look, I I think right now with Bitcoin itself, I have such a clear, great investment vehicle. Right?
Hmm.
Like I'm sitting there going like, I think Bitcoin is 100% going to go from 100,000 to 1 million within 10 years.
Yeah,
I really believe that. Like,
of
with
course.
very high
I
conviction.
genuinely agree with you. I agree with you.
Right.
There
So
is no
so if
top.
I start with that position, right? Uh, you know, and I don't need the Bitcoin for my lifestyle, right? then I'm sort of sitting there going, well, you really have to convince me that they're going to do something amazing to beat that, right? So
Yeah.
you're like, I've got a kind of like a 10x in the bag, right?
Yeah.
So now you're going to say, well, but Fred, they're going to start a Bitcoin insurance company or a Bitcoin bank. So you need to take the 10x that you have completely guaranteed, and you have to go into this concept of the Bitcoin bank. Well, maybe they'll get 20x, right? Are they going to do
Yeah.
100x? I doubt it. You know,
How do you know
I just
that?
think
How do you know that they won't? Let's say, for example, whatever your Bitcoin is at right now, how do you know that they won't outperform significantly from here? Maybe not 100x. Maybe they'll do a 20, 30, 40x, right? How do you know that that's not
here's the
possible?
thing. It's like, generally speaking,
Yeah.
I think nothing outperforms Bitcoin, including
Okay.
MSTR. Like my point is, you don't need, you're trying to be too fancy here. Okay. I'm just like, you've got something that looks like a complete and utter home run. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah. That's a
The
good.
one thing I think where everybody gets things wrong is not trying to figure out exactly which horse to run. The
Yeah.
horses are pretty clear. The problem is people need to stick with the horse for a long period of time, right? That's
That's it.
more important. So to
That's it.
me, I think I'm pretty happy with, like, if you want to be involved in MSCR, go ahead. I'm not going to knock you for doing it, right?
Of course.
And I won't even say that I wouldn't play again. That somehow it goes down. I decide to buy a little bit more. But for me, the meaningful position I have is Bitcoin itself. I just think
Yeah.
Bitcoin itself is the more interesting long-term thing. And my
Absolutely.
main thing is, I just want to, and why am I on Bitcoin Spaces, and why? Because I've thought about this. Why do us as a group love to hang out and talk about this stuff? And I think what it is we're all there for one reason. We want to convince ourselves and build conviction about our asset, right?
Yeah.
We all have so much of our savings and our time and our energy that's focused on this one asset, right? And so we all feel like it's kind of like a little bit like we've got this tree that we planted, and it's a little spruce right now, and it's going to grow up, or it's like a kid that you raise who's like 5, and you're measuring the kid's height every year, against this, like, you say, oh, you grew a little bit this year, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But like, I feel like we're watching this thing grow, right? And I feel like we want to talk about our kid or our tree a lot. We're very obsessed with this thing that's growing, right? We want it to continue to grow. We don't want the government to take our tree and chop it down. We don't want, somebody to steal or kidnap our kid. We want to keep it. We want to keep it secure. And we want to understand everything that can happen to this kid. Like, maybe the kid's going to, start going to college 2 years early. Okay, we want,
Yeah.
because of Michael Saylor kind of providing scholarships or something like. So, I think I'm very interested in what Michael Saylor does because it impacts Bitcoin, right? But my main interest in this is, how is it going to impact Bitcoin? I'm not so concerned about what does it do to the MicroStrategy thing, because there's almost no scenario in my world where I would ever own more than 10% of my net worth in MicroStrategy. I would
Oh,
never do that,
absolutely. No, I
right?
completely agree with that. I don't think in general with investing, when you have when you're investing in something, like in the current system we have it backwards. We save basically nothing and we invest everything, because we're forced to buy stocks, we're forced to buy real estate, forced to buy government bonds, corporate bonds. We can't save because the money that we have is going to zero,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, look, and also you're not going to live forever, and so
Mhm.
real estate. I have some real estate, and I'm sort of looking at buying another piece of real estate, not as an investment, but just
For
because I
yourself.
kind of like. I wouldn't mind having an apartment in Paris. Okay, why?
Yeah.
Because I like going to Paris. I like having my own apartment in Paris. And it would make it, you're not living forever, so whatever.
Yeah.
So it's nice having real estate. if I was really young starting out, that would be the last thing I would try to do, right?
Yeah. I
If
actually
I
want to
was
talk to you
young
about
right
that.
now, if I was a millennial,
Yeah.
or a Gen Z, and I'm sitting there going, "Yeah, I got to save up for a house," I'd be like, "Wrong,
Yeah.
wrong idea." You know what I mean? You should
Yeah.
be like trying to get as much Bitcoin as you possibly can right now, and I would be 100% in Bitcoin. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
Like, you know, once you get kind of to middle age, you're like, yeah, I don't need to be 100% Bitcoin, and maybe I don't want to rent a place. I want to have my own place.
Yeah.
But I think for young people right now, it's very clear that the 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 real estate asset is significantly overpriced relative to wherever it's been in history.
Yeah.
Relative to like income, right? Like, how many years is it going to take you to pay off the average, 2-bedroom condo in Toronto, right? I don't even know what things cost nowadays in Toronto, but it's expensive city, right?
Yeah.
So you could be slaving away for the next 20 years of your life, and you've now bought yourself a 2-bedroom, and you don't have
Yeah.
anything else, right? Or you could buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and maybe you buy a few call options and do a little bit of trading on the side, and you turn that Bitcoin up into you maybe increase it a little bit, right? Take a
Yeah.
little bit extra risk, and now you've got 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you got a major stash, right?
Yeah. Hey, I
And I think
actually, I
that to me works. That's what whenever I talk to somebody like under 30, I say, and they're all like, well, I need to buy a house. I
yeah.
met this girl. I want to buy the house. I'm like, man, I mean, like, I would not recommend it, man.
Yeah.
Like,
And I think I'm actually, so I'm a millennial, and I'm not sure if my audience, you've probably seen this playlist, but I
I haven't
actually
seen
make a
this.
lot of
No.
videos. I
Okay.
make a lot of videos talking about why
Okay.
Bitcoin
So
is better.
cool. Yeah.
And I get a lot of pushback. I get so much pushback. People think, oh, cash flow, tax advantages, uh, all these different reasons. Oh, real estate has this background. Or no, sorry, real estate's been around for so long. It's going to be around for another 100 years, and people will keep investing in it. People will keep buying it. But I think most people don't see that it is overvalued. And I'm so happy that you said that, because coming
Yeah.
from coming from somebody like you, I don't think I've seen you tweet about it. I don't think I've seen you post about it, but it helps to understand the asset a little bit more, because you've been on Wall Street for so long. You have that background where you
Yeah.
understand, right?
I mean, I have posted a little bit about it
Have you?
because,
Okay, okay.
yeah, not much, not like you. But
Nothing that I've seen. I'm regularly posting about it. So for me, I post
yeah,
regularly. Yeah.
listen. I think eh, it's the biggest it's the biggest thing that you're ever going to spend your money on is a house, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's also, I think it's we're also in a very mobile society now, right? And if you think you're going to always be in Toronto, I could probably have news for you. Probably aren't. You know what I mean? Like,
No, no way.
you know what I mean? Like, your options are much higher now, right? It's much easier to live anywhere you want in the world, right? And so, and I think more and more people are realizing this. And so I think over even just the long-term advantages of just having Bitcoin, uh, the disadvantage of tying your financial situation to a specific real estate market, right,
Yeah.
is not great, right? You know, because you don't know. I mean, you could be in San Francisco, and all of a sudden, it goes from you know, in 1999 or 2000, like the best place, or even 2006, one of the hottest real estate markets in the world, to right now being a complete disaster zone, right?
Hmm.
Do you want to, where you know you have violence that's sort of erupting, homeless people in the streets, and the government's not on your side, right? Like,
Yeah.
your house gets burglarized and, you're at fault. Yeah. I mean, I just think that, real estate, it's very local, right?
Yeah.
You can buy in the wrong block on San Francisco.
Yeah.
You could, but I think the assumption that you're going to be living in San Francisco for, even if you love it when you're 30, you may hate it when you're 40.
Yeah.
So I just think that in general, you're better off renting, I think, and I think the big advantage of real estate, the one big advantage that you have over Bitcoin is that you can get this loan, right?
Yeah.
You can go massively in debt. You can 10x your down payment or 5x it, right? Very easily, right?
Yeah.
And you're not going to be mark to market, right? On your, if the price of San Francisco real estate goes down, the mortgage company's not going to knock on your desk saying, well, we need to double your payment.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin loans are not as good. You don't have quite as much leverage, as you do with real estate. But you don't need it because Bitcoin's growing at such a compound growth rate.
Yeah.
You don't need it, in almost any scenario, if you hold Bitcoin and you just hold it for 10 years, you're going to far outperform your brother who puts all his money into a condo, so I just think you're going to be better off with real estate.
Yeah. I think that real estate is a lifestyle choice. It's just a way for you to not have to pay rent. It gives you stability. I guess there are some positives, but if it's for financial reasons purely, I don't think it makes any sense.
I just think, everybody says, they go to me and they go, well, Fred, your generation, you had it so easy. You could buy real estate. I'm like, well, not really. First of all, because, when I was in college, interest rates were, astronomically high, right? Like, we're talking, 10%, you know what I mean? Like, now you're still paying astronomical rates on your credit cards right now. Like if you have to fund your credit cards, that rate's like 25% now. The average credit card is rotating up. But I just think that I think between real estate taxes, maintenance, tying yourself down, all of this was a trade that worked great 20 years ago, right? Doesn't mean that it's good for the next 20 years. I mean, like, get with the times, so I just think it's not, and I just think that right now when people say that, I'm going, well, when I was, in college, we didn't have such a great opportunity called Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So you're the ones have it great now. You have this amazing asset, which you're discovering before 99% of the people. Okay,
yeah, and most people my age seem to be ignoring it right now, and they don't really.
They do. So, like, I'm just saying, like, stop yelling about real estate. Stop whining about how you can't afford real estate, and instead take your energy and just go buy Bitcoin. That's kind of my view. Like you don't realize how lucky you are to get in on Bitcoin, even at 100,000. You are so lucky to get in on Bitcoin. And but people want to complain. They love to look at woe is me. I'm sorry, I didn't get access to the my parents. Their cheap mortgage, their cheap real estate back when you could buy a condo in Toronto for $200,000.
And I think people are just letting they're ignoring it because they think it's grown so much. They don't think it's going to go higher. They have this belief, this just ongoing voice in their head telling them that, oh, the price of a house is going to keep going up. It's going to keep going up. It's going to keep going up. And why would you buy this thing that you can't even touch, that you can't even hold? And gold is better, or silver is better, or this is better, or that is better. And it's just, I don't quite understand it. I mean, I get it. Okay, you need a house to live in, but if you look at it purely from a financial perspective and trying to figure out how you can do best for your finances in the long term, I think Bitcoin is making it completely obvious, but people are just
Well,
ignoring it.
also you're going to have, if your money's in Bitcoin,
Mhm.
you might be able to get a job somewhere else that's not in Toronto.
Yeah,
That requires you moving to Silicon Valley or New Delhi or I don't know, Kazakhstan. You know what
anywhere.
I mean?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So my point is, it probably is going to be better for you to have your money be transportable.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It gives you more options. Right.
yeah,
Do you want to be stuck in one place, or do you want to be transportable? I think, having options is great. So
for
I
sure.
think I just think I think it's an amazing opportunity for young people. And I think we're going to look back 10 years, 20 years from now, and most people will have made the wrong decision. And some people will have they will be doing very, very well because they listened to some of your videos. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yours
I
as
think
well. Yours as
it's,
well.
yeah, but I'm just thinking, that's a difference that we can make.
Yeah.
Does it help everybody? No. But, look, I love the fact that if I can convince some people to gain conviction on Bitcoin, I feel like I've helped a little bit the world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When I used to work on Wall, I used to work at a big bank in Canada, TD Bank,
Which one?
TD. So I
Oh
used to
yeah,
work on their
condominium.
fixed
Yeah,
income desk.
yeah.
So I was working with all these massive funds that are just saving for the future. But a lot of them were insurance companies. They were buying uh, bonds. They were buying all kinds of fixed income products, and it just felt to me like, oh, my job is pretty much useless. I'm helping this company to make a little tiny bit of money, and then my bank is extracting the majority of their profits from them anyways. So to them,
Right.
my work is basically making no difference. And I think that's what I'm sure you see it the same way. I think that's one of the most fulfilling things about posting on social media about Bitcoin, because we can help more and more people to figure this thing out, to understand what it is, to see where it's going. And I think you're doing a great job of doing that on your page. I hope I'm doing a great job of doing that on my page. And I feel like it's just different opinions. They just keep helping more and more people get to that final point of understanding where Bitcoin is going, what it is, how it's
It
going to do
takes.
it.
I mean, if it was simple as explaining it to people and people understanding it,
Yeah.
then there would be no need for all these podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's really like breaking down a wall. You've got to be submitted to this message over and over and over and over again. And I think we can be so lucky that something changed in our brain at some
Yeah.
point that we got it.
Yeah.
But you could listen to 50 hours of the stuff and still not get it. You could still be
Yeah.
like, well, it's too risky for me. So I don't know, and it depends for everybody. It's a little different. What is it that's going to make them see things a little differently?
Yeah. So for you, I
Yeah,
want to ask you,
yeah.
what is the thing that got you to start thinking differently? I mean, I had my the CFA Institute actually came after me. They investigated me for my in Bitcoin content, and they basically told me that somebody reported me for being
Who did that?
the CFA Institute.
Okay, yeah.
So I have my CFA charter. The CFA Institute
All right.
investigated my content, my
Yeah, I saw you
posts.
post on that, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, I
I saw
posted
you
about it.
post on that, and I was like, okay,
It's crazy, right? And
yeah,
it just it shows me that people aren't willing to see this paradigm shift.
no.
They're just not willing to. So what for you, what was the thing that ticked in your head that made you start looking at this and really feeling like this is the future?
Well, look, I'm a slow student, right? So I bought Bitcoin, I poo-pooed Bitcoin for years and years and years before I got serious, like
Mhm.
6 years, right? So, I first bought it in 2013, And I was around all these people, these Bitcoiners from 2013 all the way up till 2019. And I didn't really take it seriously.
Hmm.
And, and then I had a chance to, I was invited to a bank, a crypto bank, kind of boondoggle in Bermuda. And it was about 100 people there. And the guest of honor was Tom Lee from Fundstrat.
Oh, right.
And so, yeah, I got to hang out with Tom Lee, and Bitcoin was at 5,000. And I said, well, it's okay, Tom, where's this thing going? And he's like, it's going to 1 million. And I'm like, is that 5,000, Tom? You're saying 5,000 going to 1 million? Like, show me, how's that work? That's a completely insane call, right?
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, and he goes, listen to my talk. I'm going to give this couple talks during this thing. And I said, I'm very curious to see how you paint that picture. I'm very skeptical, right?
Yeah.
And then he was like, well, look, it's actually all about demographics. And he's like, it's sort of like, I'm sort of the tail end of the boomer, or one tail of the boomer, right? I'm the younger side of a boomer, right? But then there's, the boomer kind of asset class was S&P 500, right? They say basically, the older boomers were kind of conceived right after World War II, and they grew up in the 60s, right, in the 70s, in the 50s even, right, and America was just starting to really dominate the world, and so they wanted to like buy America, just that was the theme, so how do you buy America? You buy the stock market, right? And so that was the theme for the boomers. And the next generation, Gen X, well, they don't want to do what their parents did with buy America. They want to buy tech, right?
Yeah.
So they want to buy, Yahoo at that time, Amazon, you know what I mean? Like Cisco Systems, right? So, that was sort of the Gen X view of the world, right? They want to buy the internet stuff, and then the next generation is your generation, which is the millennial, right? Now, millennials, I don't really want to buy stocks anymore, right?
Yeah.
And they don't really want to buy McMansions anymore, right? That's not really part of your DNA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You kind of want more the freedom. You want to go live a year in Thailand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if you start with that point of view, you're like, I need an asset that I can carry around with me. And I don't want to be in a McMansion, like my parents, or my grandparents, right? I don't want to be saddled with a mortgage. I don't want to go see a banker. I find that about as interesting as going to see a dentist. I want an asset. So what's the best asset class for this generation? Crypto.
Yeah.
Well, let's just use the word crypto, not even Bitcoin, but crypto assets. That's best, right? You can hold it on your phone. You can travel with it. You can write down a seed phrase somewhere. You can go somewhere. It's safe, completely transportable. No intermediaries. So I was like, when I heard that and I was mulling it over, and I was like, you know what? That totally makes sense. And nobody had communicated that argument to me before. And I was like, you know what? I've been sort of screwing around here, like screwing around with other cryptocurrencies and stuff. And I was like, and he's just like, that's the best. You're going to want to go with the best. Going to go with Bitcoin. And so, I started developing a serious position in Bitcoin then. I was like, look, not easy to buy 7 figures of Bitcoin, no. as a, I was a successful guy, right? But like, even successful guys with tons of exits have a hard time, moving money from Goldman Sachs into Coinbase. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, like, it's not something most my friends do. You know what I mean? They might put 50 grand or 100 grand or something. They're not moving millions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I did that. and my timing couldn't have been better,
Yeah.
right? 2019 turned out to be a very good time to buy, right?
Yeah.
It was like, just the timing of me sitting down with Tom Lee was really great, right? And then, of course, after that, I just got more and more and more into specifically Bitcoin, and then I kind of started getting really obsessed with Bitcoin after that, just like, and I'm a math guy, so I started looking more into the math of Bitcoin, Satoshi and everything, and I just became kind of Bitcoin obsessed, like, how is this thing possible? Like, how could I have not seen this? Like, over all these years, I was like, how did this thing escape fly under my radar, right?
Yeah.
And so, and by the way, I will send you a copy of my big Bitcoin book, by the way. But
Oh, amazing.
This is my Bitcoin book
Oh,
that you'll
yeah.
get. So this book is, when you see it, it is by far the best looking book on Bitcoin. I'll show you just like
It's pretty
what
nice.
it
Yeah.
looks like. It's really almost like an art book on Bitcoin.
It looks
But
like a
with
coffee table book.
it is a coffee table book, right?
Wow.
It's an art book, right? So
Yeah.
basically, it's like all the people involved, all the memes involved, but it's we researched it with my co-author. We've been researching all this stuff and the people behind Bitcoin and everything, and the mathematical ideas behind Bitcoin for
Amazing.
years, and so this is just the culmination of kind of something that I'm completely convinced that this is going to be the most important thing that I see in my life.
Yeah.
It is the most important, just not just for me making money, but like it's going to have the biggest impact, I think, of any other invention, including the internet, even. Like
Yeah.
I feel like it is the ultimate invention, right? Because what does it do? It ultimately governs distribution. Who gets what? How do economies work, right? And if we
Yeah.
can have this new form of money, I think it means everything's change. Everything can change. Like we get a truly global economy. There's
Yeah.
almost no need for nations anymore. You can completely take your Bitcoin wherever you want. You'll find the country that accommodates you the best. You go there. And it's completely global money.
Yeah.
It works across borders. You can send it to anybody anytime. If the government doesn't like you, shop around for a better government, So I think it's just it's an amazing tool, and you can easily leave it to your loved ones, and and now it's going to be integrated in with the whole financial system, So it's the future, and it's going to be such an important thing. I can't shut up about it.
Yeah.
It's like that's kind of the way I feel. And as I said, kind of like I've kind of got my stack of Bitcoin, so I'm not so concerned about buying anymore. Will I probably sell some? At some point, I will sell a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to buy more things,
Yeah. Absolutely.
not because I want to, buy some other asset, but yeah, if I want to buy an apartment in Paris or something,
See, this is something that people
that
don't
I'll
quite get.
do.
I talk
Yeah,
about this regularly. I say, hey, Bitcoin isn't something that you don't sell. You sell it to pay for your lifestyle. You don't sell
yeah,
it to buy other things. Let's so not you don't sell it to save in something else. You don't sell it to, let's say, save in gold. You sell it to improve your
yeah,
life,
yeah.
right? And
Which is
that's how
the entire point, right?
exactly.
The entire point of all this stuff is to have a good life.
Yeah.
And
Do you think about borrowing against your Bitcoin at all, or
here's the thing. So I think I don't,
Mhm.
right? Um, but I understand that people do. Right?
Yeah.
I think there's a massive need to do that, right?
Mm.
So I think that this is going to be a really big business in the next 10 years. And my friend Ben Sigmund, the co-author of my book, is working on a borrowing platform for Bitcoin.
Okay.
So, and I think this is really, and there's a lot of different approaches to this, right? There's one approach which is like very KYC and institutional, and you're going to have Cantor Fitzgerald as a counterparty. That's one approach, right? And then sort of on the other approach is like Aave, where it's like just a protocol, right? And you can, you're not, there's no KYC. You're just coming in, you're getting some loan, right? I think both of those things, and my friend is more on the protocol level, right? So he's doing more I'm not doing the actual loans, but just a very kind of completely trustless protocol that you can just borrow money. If you want to come in with $100, you can borrow $10. It's like this, and you never need to convert it. You're just keys, or you can see exactly where it is on Bitcoin, doesn't get moved or anything. So I love that model, right?
Yeah.
I think that model is really good, but I also think, if you have your money in ETFs, those ETFs are going to be pretty good for borrowing against at some point, right?
Definitely.
Because, I have a bunch of those ETFs now too. I bought a bunch of ETFs. I definitely sort of see in the not too distant future, you might have an account at, Merrill Lynch, or, your Merrill Lynch person will be like, would you like a mortgage, sir? We're happy to have Merrill Lynch mortgage. Will happily write you a mortgage, sir. For a person of your, ETF caliber, happy to give you. By the way, would you like, tickets to the Knicks? Hockey game. We're happy to. I just think it's like going to be the white glove treatment that they do for people with big portfolios, right?
Yeah.
So I think both of those things are very valid, right? I think, borrowing trustlessly without KYC is great. I think, all kinds of different things. I personally don't think I'm going to do too much borrowing. I may do some lending, so what I may do is just say, hey, you want to borrow? If you're a borrower, I got maybe some stable coins. I'll lend you some of my stable coins.
Yeah.
I could see doing that, take some of Fred's money, because I always keep, my view on this is you should never be 100% in cash in Bitcoin.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is you never know what's going to happen in life, right?
Yeah.
And what you don't want to do is you don't want to get in a car accident, and all of a sudden let's just say you have $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, right? And you're in this car accident, you need to borrow $50,000 worth of Bitcoin. Except now the problem is we also went into a bear market, and your $100,000 of Bitcoin is only worth $50,000.
Price dropped, yeah.
Okay, so guess what? Now you have to sell all your Bitcoin to pay for your car accident, right? That's not smart, right? So if you had $30,000 of cash and $70,000 of Bitcoin, well, you'd only have to sell, a third of your Bitcoin, and you could use the cash, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just, having a buffer of cash is a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think managing this thing automatically. So, I keep on going back to something like a 70% Bitcoin or 80% Bitcoin is kind of where you should max out, and keep the rest in liquid thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And look, if Bitcoin maybe hits another really big bear market, then you can buy more, right? With that, you know what I mean? If Bitcoin keeps on going up, well, great. You just take some off the table, and you've now got a bigger cash position, but you're still 70-80% in Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So I think both of those things kind of make sense, and I've thought about it enough, and you can even model it out mathematically, and it tends to have like really good properties.
So Fred, this is actually a great point to pivot. I wanted to ask you a question about. This is a question that I ask all my podcast guests, all the people who come on this show.
Sure.
What do you think are the most important downstream effects of Bitcoin?
What do you mean by downstream effects?
So, in my opinion, a downstream effect would be something like people no longer have to invest to save. That's a huge
Ah,
downstream effect because now people can invest in themselves instead of having to put all their money into a stock, into a real estate, into a property. They can now invest in their family. They can invest in themselves. They can invest in their own businesses. I think this is going to lead to a lot more small businesses. It's going
I
to lead
think,
to a lot.
yeah, I think one of the things is better predictability, right?
Mhm.
I think if you had told me, well, or yourself, right? If you said, okay, how much does it cost in Toronto for a steak dinner for two? Like, how much does that cost currently?
Probably about $100, if not
$100
more. If not
Canadian.
more, without wine. I don't
Okay,
drink wine, so without
I
wine,
don't
it would be
drink
about
wine
100.
either, but let's just say with wine, okay?
With
Because
wine, probably 175, $200 total.
$200, right? Exactly,
Yeah.
right. So now I would say that same dinner, uh, 5 years ago was $100.
Yeah, easily.
Okay. So if you told me that the price of a dinner is going to go up double in 5 years, I would have said, no, come on, man. It's not
Mhm.
possible, right? But yet it did, right? So I think we are living in a very unpredictable financial world, right?
Yeah.
And everything is like that. I think the dining experience is you see it so often because you go out so often, right? So everybody goes out a lot, and so
Yeah.
people see that, wow, this thing really changed. Really made a big difference. But then there's something other times you don't see it as much, where it's like you're not shopping for health insurance all the time, but your health insurance is ended, and they say, oh, by the way, we're increasing your premium. It just tripled. And you're like,
Yeah.
what? How's that possible? Like, well, or your house insurance, we'll just double that. And you're like, wait a second, I thought I planned all this calculation for living here, and this. And now you're telling me my insurance just doubled. So I feel like we're living in this world where your expenses are completely unpredictable, right? You have no idea what it's going to be in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what your taxes are even going to be like, right? I mean, as early as 6 months ago, people were talking about taxes on unrealized gains.
Yeah.
So
Insanity.
there's the amount of financial insecurity that you have is really high, really high. And especially as you get older, it should really concern you, right?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people have this view that they've got this portfolio, this house, and everything's cool and is under control. But now I think that view is being challenged, right? You have got this house. It was in a nice place in San Francisco, except now there's a homeless encampment in front of your house and you can't get rid of it. Like, okay, now you got a problem, right? So I think that having a fixed number of Bitcoin that that you have those Bitcoin, and with very high likelihood, the value of those Bitcoin is not going to go down. In fact, it's probably going to go up quite a bit. That really will change the way you lead your life, I think.
Yeah.
And I think everybody I know who's a Bitcoiner, you can tell that they've got a little bit more calm and composure, because they fundamentally know, even if the market's going down, they fundamentally know, if you've been hodling for a couple of years, right? You can tell that it's like the guy's more calm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, and you're not sitting there trying to make trade and do this and do that, and so I feel like it's a really, really good personal character builder, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's a small number of Bitcoiners who've got this. It's like, for example, I feel the same way about drinking. Like, I don't drink either, right? And I kind of feel like, you know, if I see people who are drinking a lot, I'm like, well, you know, you're missing out on really a lot, because, you know, you're half the time you're completely buzzed, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like, I think if you've got the Bitcoin religion, it'll take you to a lot of great places in life. And that's kind of I really believe that, you know. Now, if you bought it but you don't really have the religion and you haven't studied it enough, you know, you're probably going to make the worst possible decision.
Yeah.
You know, and you're going to probably sell it at the absolute low.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, the developing the conviction level is maybe even more important than actually having the Bitcoin. It's very important to really understand the conviction, really understand the asset, really get it, really understand exactly what it is. Now, what about as a country? I think as a country, you know, we live in different countries, obviously, but I think, you know, we're in a similar situation. I think it's a sense of sanity. You know, when people they're like, if you start by cleaning up your own financial house and you have some Bitcoin that you've set aside, and and you're not digging into that, you're increasing your stack, you know, until you get to, you know, Fred's old age. But you know, like if you're young, you're adding always to your stack, you know. You know, Simon Dixon says, he goes, you know, I always try to end the year with more Bitcoin than I started the year, you know. And I think if you keep that kind of discipline, I think you tend to think, well, you know, I also want the rest of my country to have more discipline. I want them to balance their budget. Why can't they balance their budget? You know, so I think it also it makes you feel more responsible as a, you know, a human being, you know what I mean? Like as a citizen, you know, you become more interested in like cleaning up our country's mess, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, Bitcoiners are a force of good, you know, in the world, because, you know, we sort of like, look, we take care of our own financial mess, we clean it up. We tend to try, and by the way, this has changed, right? So in 2017, 2016, there was a lot of really degen Bitcoining, you know what I mean? With Lambos and everything else, you know?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's completely changed. Like the new Bitcoiner is like, you know, I live very simply, I eat healthy, I don't eat seed oils, you know? Like, so I really love the new Bitcoiner, you know, ethos, where I kind of didn't like the Lambo stuff at all. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, that was a total turnoff for me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess they just they matured, right? They started seeing things differently. I guess you also, I mean, that's what's happened for me,
Well,
at
I'm sort of
least.
seeing some of the bad qualities emerge with these MicroStrategies bros.
Oh, okay. Why?
You see
What
what
are
I'm
the bad
saying?
qualities there?
Well, I mean, they're all talking about their Ferraris and, you know, like, hey, Fred, you're stupid. You know, you're only getting, like, you're in this boring old IBIT thing. And like, look, IBIT's great. Like, cold storage is fantastic, man. Like,
Yeah.
you want to talk about MicroStrategy, great. What Michael Saylor's doing is great, but let's not forget that what we've accomplished now in Bitcoin is amazing, right?
Yeah.
We finally have a Bitcoin ETF. It only took us
Huge.
10 years to get it, but like, it's great. It's fantastic. Now I can tell all my friends to buy Bitcoin. I don't have to talk to them about saving a seed phrase. Like, you know, so I think the MicroStrategy guys are a little bit, you know, they're like, well, Fred, you know, you're too old school. You're over the hill boomer. I'm like, I'm a Bitcoiner, man. Like that's, you know, like you should be a
that's
little
all that
bit more of
matters.
that too. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not going to bash MicroStrategy. I'm not bashing, but
Of course.
I would say, you know, it's, you know, if people say, well, you only can double your money in a year, I'm like, this is fantastic. Like, I hope I double it next year. I mean, that would be amazing to me. You know what I mean? Like that would be unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, I think it's there's a lot of sort of easy money, and a lot of people are getting seduced by leverage and options, and God bless them. That doesn't tend to work out. It's greed is the enemy here. You just want to be very, very steady.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to win.
Yeah.
If you're very steady, and whatever it takes for you to be very steady, that's great. If it's cold storage, that's great. If it's an ETF, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm sort of a little bit anti anything that's degen behavior. I don't like it.
Yeah.
So
over leveraging with options, having too much, going 100x, for example. Of course, that makes sense.
Terrible. I mean, the minute you go even 10x is just crazy in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? You've
don't
got
need to.
an amazing opportunity with Bitcoin. Don't screw it up. I just think that don't overcomplicate it, and don't, I mean, the old timers are right. It's just stay humble, stack sats.
That's it.
That's the best advice you can give.
Yeah. Stay humble, stack sats. That's it.
So, I mean, that's really it. And, listen, I'm entertained by all this stuff. I'm not anti. So I host these spaces now with my friend Wayne Vaughn. There's an OG Bitcoiner
on Twitter.
And, like I go to Wayne and I was like, and he's like, wow, these Wayne's like, yeah, these kids, man, they're like killing me. And I'm like, look, Wayne, it's fine. It's like, he goes, they're just going to blow up. And I'm like, you probably will, but it's not like we haven't been here before. We've seen this, and there's, so but I keep an open mind. I'm not anti anything. I'm actually like kind of pro Ordinals.
Okay.
I think it'd be kind of cool if there was great art that was done on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I'm not really in the business of making art. I might do an art book later. We'll see. But we did a ordinal as part of our book that was sort of a proof of ownership, right?
Oh, nice.
That lives on blockchain. It says you have number 67 on the book, right? And each one of them is separate. It's more like a gimmick than anything else. It's not meant to.
It's entertainment.
It's some. What I think the interesting thing is that Bitcoin is a time chain, right? It's a record of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of storing some data on Bitcoin is interesting. Has it really materialized as something really very, very useful? Not really yet today. I don't really think, bored monkey on Bitcoin is something that the world really needs. But, who knows? I was for a very long time in the domain name business. And when I first saw domain names on Bitcoin, I was like, that does sound like something quite good for me. Like, if I could put the record of a domain name on Bitcoin, as opposed to paying ICANN, and GoDaddy to register my domain name, how great would it be to just sort of record the fact that I have this domain name on Bitcoin? I don't have to pay anybody. It's just on Bitcoin. And I can transfer that domain name with Ordinals. This seems, on the surface, it seems really great. Now, in order to do that, you'd have to have browsers build it and stuff. But there definitely seems to be something there with using Bitcoin for data. Even Saylor there was this Project Orange that he called it, with some kind of identity on Bitcoin. So, I'm open to the other uses of Bitcoin. And I'm open to things like MicroStrategy that use Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I'm interested in all of it. It's all part of this bigger thing called Bitcoin.
It's part of the bigger story. Everything
it's
has
all the bigger story,
Everything has a piece. Everything makes a difference. Even if, let's say, for example, with MicroStrategy, I like to talk about MicroStrategy because I think
Sure.
it's very interesting. I like talking about it because I think that they're doing something very interesting. They're basically bridging the financial system, the legacy financial system, in my opinion. Maybe I'm thinking of this wrong, but I mean the point
Well,
here is
I think you're thinking about it right, but here's the thing. I think there's been, why does MicroStrategy exist? It exists because there's all these there's too much regulation.
Mhm.
There's all this
Oh yeah, you made a post about this. I saw this.
yeah, there's all this anti-crypto regulation that was introduced by the likes of Elizabeth Warren and
Mm,
Gary Gensler and everything, right? And the banks, the FDIC, the American Banking Association, all the rest, right? They the powers, the deep state has really fought against having banks have any ability to sell crypto, to hold crypto. Not
yeah.
good. They don't like that, right? And now I think because of this, you can't go into a branch of Toronto Dominion and just buy
No,
Bitcoin.
no,
But you
not at all.
should. You
Yeah,
should be able to, right? You should be able to walk into a branch of Toronto Dominion and say, "Here, I got $500. Give me some Bitcoin." Great. Here's your
in
Bitcoin,
cold
sir.
storage. Yeah,
Or yeah, just get on my mobile wallet. Just send me
yeah,
it. Here's my Lightning invoice. Can you pay it? Oh, great. Thank you. Great.
yeah.
Perfect. Next. Like, why
And they can
can't
take their fees out of that too, right? I mean, it's not
they
even
can
like,
take
oh,
their fees? And
yeah,
that should be available in every single ATM in America.
yeah,
Why do we not have that? Right?
yeah.
Why can't
It it is, but they charge you like 15% spreads.
well,
Insane.
those are Bitcoin ATMs,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But what I'm just saying, like every single ATM
yeah.
could potentially offer Bitcoin.
They should. Yeah.
Like you can buy stamps in a lot of ATMs in America now, right?
Wow.
But you can't buy Bitcoin. So we've had this we've had these powers. They've fought to keep Bitcoin away from the citizens. They've sort of said it's for your own good. Well, it's not. It's clearly not been for your own good. They've really
No.
prevented everybody from buying it, right? But I think that's going to change, and I think at some point in the not too distant future, there's going to be a merger between all this financial world, this fintech world where you used to work, and I used to work.
Yeah.
And it's a world that I know quite well, right? And Bitcoin. These two things are going to mesh, right?
Yeah.
And MicroStrategy is part of it, but they're actual banks are going to own Bitcoin, not too far, and they're going to sell Bitcoin. The CEO of Charles Schwab made a statement 2 days ago. He's like, "Why can't Why can't people buy Bitcoin on Schwab? Not ETFs,
Yeah.
actual Bitcoin.
Actual Bitcoin. Yeah.
Actual Bitcoin. Like, what's to stop Schwab from selling it to people like Coinbase? Why not? And I read that. I was like, of course you should be allowed. Like, the only reason is some bank regulator is telling you that it's too risky for some capital ratios or something, which is nonsense, right? You're talking about enabling customers to buy and hold Bitcoin. How crazy is that? That you shouldn't be penalized for that. So I think we're going to see a merger of all these things. Bitcoin's going to become a mainstream financial asset.
Yeah.
Absolutely mainstream. And I fundamentally think that we will be probably 10 years from now. I think you're going to be able to take a regular checkbook and say, I pay you 650,000 sats.
Wow.
So, write it in the thing.
I'd say it would be with a debit card.
Debit card too,
Yeah.
right?
Debit card, credit card. Yeah.
Yeah, but the debit card can be denoted in sats, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to take sats. I'm going to send sats to you, and I, at the end of the month, you have to pay in sats, right?
Yeah.
Like, here's your balance. Okay, you owe. Oh Jesus, I own 2 million sats this month. Great, pay in sats. So if we get to that point, that we're going to have a parallel economy, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're going to get there. And I do think, I think it's going to be. I think every single thing you want to buy will be purchasable with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
You know, I think you're going to be able to use it on Amazon. I think you're going to be able to use it on Expedia, hotels.com, wherever you want to spend your money, paying your rent. You know, your landlord will be like, "Oh, sure, of course we take Bitcoin. Of course,
Yeah.
you know, we're a premier Toronto apartment complex. Of course we take Bitcoin." You know, so like I think that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And then the question is, why do we need this other thing anymore? You know,
The US
at
dollar.
some point, the US dollar or the Canadian dollar, people are going to be like, well, can I pay my taxes in Bitcoin? Sure, you can pay your taxes. We want to make it easy for you to pay. If you want to pay in Bitcoin, great. So at some point, you just sort of say, well, actually, we don't need the dollar anymore. Right?
Yeah.
We don't really need it. We just.
Oh, so you think that that's where the world is going? See, I actually agree with you completely on that. I think at a point there's gonna be no need for the dollar.
I think 20 years from now we're not gonna have that.
Right? Yeah.
I do not see the need for the dollar at all.
Yeah.
And listen, you know, everybody's like, well, the dollar's so big.
It doesn't matter.
No, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, I grew up in France. The French franc, I still have, I think. I'll show you what I have. I have an old French franc note. Yeah, here. This note, this like used to be used to be about $100, right? 500 franc, right?
100 US?
100 US.
Okay.
I mean, it's got a hole in it too, but this thing was worth $100. Fortunately, I let it sit. It's not even exchangeable anymore. Like, there's no value whatsoever, zero. But it's kind of a reminder that, you know, France is, you know, the second largest country in Europe, and this is worthless. Okay. So, you know, things can happen. You know, we had all these things. Now we have the euro, right? The euro is a garbage currency as well. And it's like, that thing's not going to be around in 20 years.
No.
It's ridiculous. It's like, it's run by a bunch of bureaucrats in Brussels. It's like they can't even, complete nightmare of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Bitcoin is so much better than the euro. And the euro is not even that old. You know, it's like 20 years old. So I think we can get rid of the euro. I think we can go to all Bitcoin. And I'm pretty sure we will. You know what I mean? At
some point, yeah.
I think it's kind of inevitable. Like, we need a standard. We can't have these people in Belgium or in the central, the Fed and the Canadian. Like, it makes no sense. And the system makes no sense right now. It's clear the Fed has no idea what it's doing. Zero. They thought inflation was transitory.
Yeah.
And they've got all these PhDs doing models. They have no idea what they're doing. At the end of the day, it's whatever Jerome Powell ate for breakfast.
That's it.
I mean, it's a joke, you know? And, you know, Bitcoin's clearly the solution. It's not going to be anything else. It's not going to be Ethereum or Ripple or Solana. Like that. Yeah. I mean, those things are kind of interesting tech projects, but that may or may not amount to anything. But, like, you know, whatever. You know, they're not significant. Like, Bitcoin is significant. Bitcoin is like it's something that's going to be 100% is going to be around 40 years from now. I don't think Ripple will be around 40 years from now. I mean,
I'd be surprised if it is.
You know, it'll be like MySpace. Is MySpace around? Maybe. I don't even know if I went to myspace.com and like log in anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, these things tend to die. And so I think currencies tend to die. I think we are headed into a global Bitcoin economy world. Some countries are going to embrace it first. Some people are going to get to a Bitcoin standard pretty fast. And I think, you know, once you start seeing that and you really sort of see that that's what's going to happen, you kind of want to get your Bitcoin now, and it's going to go up, and it's going to be almost boring 20 years from now, you know.
I can see that.
And I think that's where I think we're going with this thing, and I think it will make everything so much more efficient, right? Because, you know, I'm sure that the governments will be borrowing in Bitcoin. the U.S. government will probably owe more than 21 million Bitcoin to some. It's just that's the kind of thing that's going to happen. They're going to be like, wait, you owe 30,000 Bitcoin at 5 million a Bitcoin. How's that possible? And people, don't worry about it. We'll
Don't
pay
worry
some
about
of it off. Whatever.
Yeah.
We'll do some haircut. But I think Bitcoin is going to be the foundation of everything. And I think there will be all kinds of businesses and stuff that are going to be built on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be Michael Saylor. He may be one of the first people to do it. He may have the biggest stash.
Yeah.
But, there's going to be plenty of other people who have big stacks of Bitcoin. And, it's not like, JP Morgan's the largest bank. But,
There are other banks.
There's plenty of other banks.
Yeah.
Toronto Dominion's a pretty good example. Royal Bank of Canada, Bank of Nova Scotia. There are plenty of banks all over the world, and you don't have a monopoly on banking just because you have the biggest assets at all.
No.
And I think that there'll be plenty of insurance companies offering insurance products based on Bitcoin, and it's going to be integrated everywhere in every single part of human activity. And I'm certainly in favor of Michael Saylor leading the charge. And I think he's going to do fantastic with this thing, because at the end of the day, he's making a big bet on Bitcoin. I think it's the right bet, and he's making it in size. He's going to do fantastic. And I think he's great. I'm fine with people buying MicroStrategy, but just don't do it at the expense of not owning any Bitcoin. I mean,
definitely.
that's what I feel stupid about. That's like, just keep on remembering what it's all about. It's also all about personal self-sovereignty.
Yeah.
It's about being able to change your country. It's about, all these other values that are part of what, we Bitcoiners try to teach people, and I think it's important kind of hammering those values in, not your keys, not your Bitcoin,
I think
when did we lose that one,
I think if somebody does want to buy MicroStrategy, probably the most would be maybe 10% of their portfolio.
Right, something like that.
Maximum. Yeah.
Yeah, just keep the rest, keep everything. And all these values are they're really good values. I mean, all these things that everybody from Andreas Antonopoulos, all the way up to Jeff Booth have been saying, there's this parallel economy that's slowly developing around Bitcoin and everything else, and layer twos and everything. All great, but Bitcoin, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin, hold it in cold storage, use multi-sig, learn about all that stuff, learn about OPSEC, about, make sure you're secure with all your stuff. Learn about ETFs and learn all that stuff's also important. I think that's going to play a bigger role in the future, I think, over the next couple of years than MicroStrategy will. I'm more bullish on the ETFs than I am on anything else. I think that's going to be, for sure, is going to be the biggest driver going forward. Is BlackRock. BlackRock is such a great salesman, and they've got the perfect product. I mean, IBIT is the perfect product, and so is FBTC. And I'm friends with the guys at Fidelity too. And I love Fidelity. I think Fidelity is great. I love their platform. I think that, just a shout out if anybody from Fidelity Digital Assets is listening, I think they're great. And I love the fact they do their own custody and they don't outsource it to Coinbase. And that's great. I love everything Fidelity's doing, and I have big respect for that. But I also have a lot of respect for Larry Fink and BlackRock. And
absolutely.
So I think I think we have a very, very exciting year or two ahead of us. I really do.
Yeah.
And
completely agree.
And we may have backed down from 100K or whatever. Like the road ahead is very, very good. don't get too obsessed with like what's happening in the next right there. Look a little bit ahead, and I think if you look ahead and you develop good personal habits, that's the most thing we can teach people. It's like learn not to panic, learn to hodl, learn not to sell, learn to hold your own Bitcoin, really understand self-custody, really understand multi-sig, really understand ETFs, and like all these things we can teach, and hopefully we can have an impact on people. And for those who listen and those who start embracing the Bitcoin way of life, I mean, the benefits are really good. It's sort of like going to the gym. You go to the gym, it's really good. It makes you feel really good. You know?
And that's whether you start going to the gym at 70, 50, 20.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And, listen, I gained a little weight a couple months ago. And now I'm back down. I feel like a different person, So I think that, it's just like these good habits are so important. And Bitcoin to me is the ultimate good financial habit.
Yeah.
I just think it's such a great, it's like a great value to teach your kids or to teach anybody. It's just like, here's this new thing. It's Bitcoin. There's only 21 million of them. Would you like to get 1/21 millionth of, like, my wife, I was telling her, because she owns the ETF, right? She owns the Fidelity ETF. She owns the IBIT ETF on Fidelity, the platform, right? So she goes, do I have a Bitcoin? And a whole Bitcoin? I go, well, you have the ETF. She goes, oh yeah, okay, but it's like a Bitcoin. I go, well, you actually have 5 Bitcoins. She's like, I got 5? And I go, yeah. And I go, she goes, yeah, you have 5 Bitcoin. And it's increased now to 5 Bitcoin, your ETF. It's almost doubled when she bought it. She bought it right at the beginning, right? And it's doubled, right?
Yeah.
And she's got 5 Bitcoin. And she goes, well, is that a lot or what? I go, let me put it this way.
That's a lot.
I said, there's only 21 million of these things ever, right? So if you had one, that means you have 1/21 millionth of the entire population, the entire supply of Bitcoin ever for the entire human race.
Yeah.
So 5 is really good. It's really good, Even when I'm gone, I'm going to leave you a lot more than 5, But that 5 that you have, that you hodled yourself, in 20 years, that 5, when I'm maybe dead, that 5 that you have,
worth a lot more.
It's going to be great. I mean, that might be worth $50 million. You know what I mean? That could be worth a lot of money, that 5 Bitcoin. So you just hold on to that 5 Bitcoin. Don't do anything with it, right? But it's sitting at Fidelity. It's safe. Good.
And I think that's not to say don't buy if you can't afford 5. Just buy as much as you can, whatever you can afford.
Whatever you want.
Even if you can buy for like $5,000 worth, at some point it'll be worth more. Maybe you can start a business
100%.
with it. Whatever you want with it, right? That's the goal.
100%. I mean, I do like British HODL's kind of mantra of getting to one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I do think it's a cool number because I think when, I think people, they get excited if they can own a Bitcoin,
Yeah.
And they can hold their Bitcoin, and it becomes like the ring in the Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
My precious. But I love, if you can get people, it's a big jump to get people to save $100,000 in Bitcoin right now. You know what I mean?
130,000 in Canada, 140,000. It's crazy.
Okay, right. It's a crazy number, right? Especially for young people. They're like, how am I ever going to get a whole Bitcoin?
Yeah.
But it's a good stretch goal, I think, to have that stretch goal of maybe you start with, like, your first goal is to get to 1/10 of a Bitcoin, get to 10 million sats. You know what I mean? Yeah. That might be your initial goal. And then
I think it just pushes you to increase your income too.
Yeah. Well, exactly right. That's another really good thing, right? Is that people, they now have a reason to earn more. When I tell the young people what I say, what you should do is try to figure out how to get a job and stack as much sats as possible. They're like, why would I need to get such a high paying job? I said, so you can stack sats.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, okay. That kind of makes sense, you know? Because a lot of people are like, well, I kind of wanted to be like a social worker or something. Well, great, but you're not going to be able to stack any sats.
No.
Oh, okay. So you're saying if I go work at Google, I can stack a lot of sats. Well, yeah, you probably can. Oh, maybe I should get a job at Google. You know, well, yeah, you probably should. And then stack sats. You know what I mean? That's probably your best bet, right? And so I think it kind of clarifies a lot of things when they go, okay, I'm gonna take this job. I'm not doing this job so I can buy a Rolex, right?
No.
I'm doing this job so I can buy sats, so I can have this like permanent store of value. Wow, that's great. Now I have a reason for how I can kind of organize my life. And I think that's, you know, I mean, if I was young, that probably would appeal to me. You know what I mean?
Extremely. That's a great way of thinking, right? Because you know for a fact that you have this thing that you can use in the future at some point to spend on your life. You can improve your life. You can buy a house. You can do whatever you really want with it, and you have the freedom. That's the freedom.
And look, and I think that you and I both think in terms of Bitcoin, right? So
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like I don't think always in terms of how much is the dollar value of my Bitcoin worth. I just think in Bitcoin. It's a number, you know. It's a number of Bitcoin, okay? And I think thinking in Bitcoin is a really good way to think.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to it'll be worth whatever it's worth. We know it's going to be worth a lot more in the future. But I'm not too concerned about I don't want to introduce the idea of taking profit, you know.
No.
So I want people to think about they're trying to increase that stack, which is a number, you know, a number of Bitcoin. That's what you should try to do.
And just constantly add more. Every period have more Bitcoin than the last period. So every month have more. Every year have more.
Yeah, I mean that
every quarter. Yeah,
I think that's just it's a very, very powerful thing, you know. And you know, it's just like all other good habits, like go to the gym, personal hygiene.
Yeah.
Not getting, you know, if you got a problem with alcohol, don't drink, you know. All these things are part of the same thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like our financial world is so mucked up right now, you know. It's so fuzzy and everybody's like they just don't understand it. It's complicated and you need to have some guiding light in your life, you know.
Yeah.
You don't have to solve the world's problems. You're not going to solve the world's problems. You know, I don't have a solution for what's going to happen in Ukraine, you know. I don't, you know.
Nobody does, yeah.
No, nobody does. But like I can't fix the federal deficit, right now. But I know it's a problem, and I know that I salute, you know, Elon Musk for at least trying, you know.
Yeah.
And but you know,
the most you can really do is improve your own situation.
But you should try to improve your own situation.
Yeah.
That's what you should do, right?
That's it.
And it sounds a little selfish, but you know, I do think, you know, I think it's not that complicated either. You know, it's like start studying. You know, it's like we had this great event. By the way, Rajat, if you're not doing anything in May, I'd love to invite you to our Bitcoin First event, and we're doing it in Vegas, right?
Amazing.
Yeah. So, but the you know, this woman Peg Rockaway. So she was a school teacher, and her husband was a cop, and he died. And she's a big Bitcoiner. She's got this banner, and it just says "Study Bitcoin," and enormous banner. And we all hung the banner, and we were like, "Study Bitcoin," right?
Wow.
And I love that thing because it's such a great message. Like, study Bitcoin. You need to study this thing, right? Just spend the time, study it like crazy, because this is going to make more of an impact on your thing than almost anything else. It's like if you do the work and you study Bitcoin, your life can change.
Yeah, a few hours today is going to give you like
I think it really can.
Of freedom,
decades. And if you don't study Bitcoin and you study marijuana, and you become a stoner, well, have fun staying poor. You know what I mean? Like that's as they say. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound too mean, but like, it is a personal choice. If you if you do the work and you do it, great. If you don't, I kind of don't have too much pity for you, because like you could have. There's a lot of smart people out there telling you what to do, and you got to listen and you got to do the work, and you gotta dive in. It's like going to a gym.
I do know.
If you're not, if you just walk outside the gym and you look in, that does not qualify as going to the gym.
No, you can't read headlines. I do know some stoners though who are very deep in Bitcoin, and when you very, very deep, like it's crazy. I've gone to some conferences. There's people who they're smoking weed outside, and then they're going into the conference and they're having these deep conversations with people about topics that you wouldn't even think about. It's crazy.
Okay, well,
it's interesting.
I mean, look, I don't want.
That's the thing, right? Bitcoin's for everyone. It's for everyone.
It is for everyone.
Absolutely.
But anyways, listen, it's great talking to you, man. And definitely send me your address. I'll send you a book up to Toronto.
Amazing.
I'd love for you to show it over there.
Cool.
If you ever run into Elliot Noss from Two Cows, say hi. He lives up there.
Sounds good. I will. Elliot Noss? Okay.
Yeah, this company, Two Cows? They're a domain registrar as well.
Okay. Oh, Elliot Noss. Okay.
Yeah.
I see his Twitter.
Say hi. He's in Toronto.
Awesome.
Anyways, he's the only tech guy I know in Toronto. But
yeah, everybody's in San Francisco.
I don't know them. I used to be in San Francisco. I don't even know really much people there either. But but yeah, I'm in LA. So yeah.
Amazing. Hey, Fred, that was a really great conversation. I enjoyed that. I learned a lot from you. I think we in the beginning we had some
disagreements. We agree on almost everything, anyways.
Absolutely.
Look, at the end of the day, most Bitcoiners agree on almost everything. That's what I've noticed. There's little disagreements around on the periphery, but I think our value, like
in general,
we're a common tribe of people. You know? We have the same general beliefs.
That's it.
And that's why I think we all get along so well together.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you can have conversation with everyone. You can literally go into, like for this one, we just had a 2-hour conversation. This is the first time we met.
Yeah.
Right? Crazy.
Rajat, you should also come on, we should have you in December. We'll have you on the Bitcoin First podcast.
Amazing.
So it's not there's no, it's audio only, right?
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
So we do these Twitter spaces, Wayne and I, and we do them every weekday. Right before this, so from 8 a.m. Pacific to 10 a.m.
Oh, perfect.
So add 3, so 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. I don't know if you can make it, but schedule it well in advance. And what we do is we pick a specific topic. So maybe we'll talk about we won't talk about Rajat. We'll talk about Bitcoin and real estate.
Yeah.
Okay. Like that. Yeah. Or any topic. So you figure out a topic that you're really passionate about.
Yeah.
And we'll just drill down on that topic. And the way it works is Wayne and I will ask you and we'll have a discussion on that. And then we open it up to 12 Bitcoiners. Yeah, we have like 12. Yeah, I mean, we have these regular members.
Right.
That are on our space, And it's a great group of people. And we get a lot. I mean, we have a lot of people. Like we've been doing it for about 6 weeks, and we're getting, I don't know, anywhere from 6,000 to 20,000 people.
Wow.
Per space.
That's amazing.
So
huge.
It's really big numbers, and it's really starting to. That's great, and we call it Bitcoin First. And our view is, And as Wayne came up with the idea, sort of like, we're not anti everything else, including other chains.
Yeah.
Or things like MicroStrategies or any, but our core is, at the end of the day, we're kind of Bitcoin. We are Bitcoiners. We're Bitcoin OGs, and we are cold storage guys. And we think that's the cornerstone, and everything else is, the icing on the cake. And that's kind of our.
I can see that. I agree with that. I think that's where the world is going as well.